so often these employees did not feel like they wanted to go join, a local church, did not feel that they wanted to partake, right, in a Bible study or a small group or something like that in a church environment. But because of the relationships built inside the workplace, right, because of the care shown to them by others, they felt safe.
Welcome to the Workmatters podcast, the podcast exploring the powerful connection between faith and work. Each episode features practical, real-life conversations around topics like Christian leadership, calling, workplace culture, entrepreneurship, spiritual growth, purpose-driven work, and what it means to honor God through your career and influence. So whether you're leading a business, serving customers, building spreadsheets, working in a factory, or simply want deeper meaning in your work, this podcast will encourage and inspire you to see your work as sacred and transformational. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Workmatters podcast. Brandon here, Keisha here. We're so excited to talk to our guest today, who I'm going to get to in just a moment. But, most Christians spend more waking hours at work on the job site, in the office, at the hospital, or in the classroom than they spend anywhere else. And for a lot of us, that's where faith can get complicated really quickly. I remember I worked for this company. It was a family-owned company, kind of mid-sized company, Christians, owners. But a lot of my coworkers, they weren't Christians. And they made it clear to me that they were cool that I was a Christian, just they didn't want to hear about it. They wanted me to just keep it to myself. And even saying, hey, I'm praying for you, or how can I pray for you, could make things weird, in the workplace. So a question I have often wrestled with is, what can I actually do at work as a Christian? And where, when does it cross the line? Well, today's guest is Julia Oltmanns, and she brings a deep expertise in HR, employment law, ethics, and compliance, and has done this work inside major organizations like Coca-Cola Consolidated and Zurich. She now leads in a firm called Strategic People Partners. Julia isn't just going to tell you what you can't do. She's going to help you show up at work with courage and wisdom without making it really weird. So, Julia, we are so excited to have you on the Workmatters podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So I have a lot of friends that are HR, compliance, in the same vein as you. And when I look on LinkedIn, some of their posts they talk about how lonely it is to operate in these roles, and how just the assumption is, oh, I see somebody from HR, compliance, anything that has to do with policy, procedure, I see him in the hall, I'm going the other way. And so the misconception is that they are people that are just cold, unfeeling, and faith is the very last thing you think of. But the people that I know are very faith forward, and they're like, no, this is my act of love and faithfulness, is to put these policies and procedures in place for you in order to protect you. How has that experience been for you? And how does that marry with your own expression of faith when it comes to policy and procedure and all of those good things?
Well, my story is actually that I grew up and was trained in employment law and HR, that you didn't talk about politics and religion at work. So for a long time, that was my belief, and that's what I understood. I also felt that I needed to be objective and neutral, right? I was so often involved in if there was an employee issue, if there was a situation, I had to be right, the neutral, impartial, right, third party coming into it. And so I felt like I needed to distance myself a little bit from too many personal relationships, because I needed to keep that objectivity. So actually it was kind of an awakening in my life, God showing me everything you've been trained, what you've learned and how you've been trained is not actually how God wanted me, to operate in this space of HR and employment law. So it was kind of like the light bulb went off for me. And I several years ago, and I realized this is not really what God wants. He does want us to live out our faith in the workplace And that doesn't mean we are hitting people over the head, right, with a hammer about our faith, but that means we are gently and lovingly, right, having conversations with them. I really had to change how I showed up in the workplace to be not worried as much about being the objective, neutral third party lawyer, but how can I actually just develop really authentic relationships with folks in my workplace? How can I love them well? Can I pray for them, right? How can I show up well with the people that I work with and just trust that God's going to handle the rest? There could be situations where I need to be I'm playing that employment law role, right? And I need to be involved in a difficult situation where I need to be an objective party, but just kind of trusting God will guide me in those situations. And I still need to love my coworkers, right? And I still need to be showing them that I care, building really strong relationships. But it was a light bulb moment for me, actually. So I'm so glad to hear that you have some HR friends, right, who are already living that out and don't have that barrier, between who they are on the weekends, right, who they are in their Sunday and weekend lives, and who they are their Monday through Friday.
So I'm picturing like you're having an aha moment, right? Or there's a season of this aha moment. Would- When that happened, did you dive in to kind of like, okay, what's the legal ramification of this? Or, who's writing HR policy that allows me to do this? Or were you reading something, or did you go deep dive on this? What'd you do with that?
Yes, great question. So, really, how the aha moment happened was I shifted to a new company. I started working at Zurich Insurance, and I found out that there was a group of Christians who were trying to form a Christian employee resource group and had been trying to get this group started for a couple of years. And being in the employment law role, I was actually in the position of on the committee that reviewed applications for new employee resource groups and made those decisions about which groups would be approved and which wouldn't. So, to your question, yes, as soon as I knew I was going to have to give a recommendation as to whether a Christian employee resource group should be approved, I started doing research, trying to find out if there were other groups that existed. Actually, that's how I found out about Workmatters, was because I started doing all kinds of searches online, trying to find out about faith and work and what existed. And I came upon the Workmatters website and found some of the Bible studies and guides and materials that you all had several years ago that could help us understand what it looked like to talk about faith and work, because it was all new to me. It was not something, that I had been
Wow.
exposed to before. So, yes, I did dive into research, understanding that there were other companies out there who had these Christian employee resource groups. And again, just really processing that with the Lord. I really felt like um, the old saying that he equips the called and doesn't call the equipped, right? That's how I felt. I felt that I was walking into territory that felt very uncomfortable for me and very unfamiliar to me, but that God had given me this opportunity to be involved in the start of this group, and that I needed to just trust Him in the process.
Wow. We were just talking a little bit ago off camera, and we were talking about a conference that you just went to. And I want you to share with our audience kind of where your heart came out of that conference, something that you're wrestling over. Talk about that for a minute.
Yes, one of the speakers at the National Faith at Work Summit last week said the reason that we have to have so many conversations about faith and work and the integration of faith into our work is because we really didn't learn whole life discipleship. We didn't learn what it means to follow Jesus as disciples in every single area of our lives, and work being right an area of our lives where we spend a lot of our time. But it's a broader discussion, that we have been trying to play catch up by helping people understand that they need to live out their faith in their work, because we didn't have the conversation when we were brand new Christians, right? Or we were just growing and
Yeah.
maturing in our faith. We didn't learn about being disciples of Jesus in every single area of our lives, and that includes our work.
Yeah. 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 At Workmatters, we talk a lot about internally. We also talk about it externally as well. But we talk a lot about that we at Workmatters, we're trying to help disciple for work. Right. We get discipled for having great marriages. We get discipled for being great parents. We get discipled for having great finances, and all that stuff. But very rarely do we talk about like what it means to get discipled for work and to be a disciple of Jesus at work. And so I want to talk about that in light of your expertise. I want to be a disciple of Jesus at work, right? But I sometimes I don't know what legally, like I can, like how to be a disciple of Jesus at work, like legally and stay within the parameters. And so talk about that, like just practically how can I be a disciple of Jesus at work and stay within the boundaries?
And not get fired.
Yeah. Or even make it weird, for people. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, we're in a much better legal environment than we were a few years ago, right? With the cases that have come out, with the guidance from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right? There's a lot of factors. We're in a lot better position, and we do have more ability to practice our faith in the workplace and observe, right, our religious observances with much more flexibility. And now a company really can't deny our right to observe our religion at work unless it would pose an undue hardship, on the company. So that's a pretty high standard. And that didn't used to be the standard. So we are in a different legal environment. But that said, you also asked, how do we do it without making it weird, right? And so,
Yeah.
even though we may have the legal right now to practice our faith at work more than we did in previous years, we still don't want to make it weird, right? We still want to show up well for our colleagues and build those strong relationships. So I always have told people for several years, I think the best way is always to talk about your own story, to just very naturally and authentically talk about what God has done in your own life. Talk about that at work, build relationships with folks, right? Where you have the trust and you have, built the foundation with someone that you can openly share. This is what God's done in my life, or this is a trial or a challenge I walked through, and this is how God saw me through, and just really very naturally share how God is important to you, because that's not going to be offensive to someone, right? I'm not pushing my beliefs on them. I'm not telling them they need to believe the same thing I do, right? That's not going to cause someone to really take offense when I'm just sharing from my heart. This is who I am. This is how I've seen the Lord work in my life. And I'm naturally sharing with you because I'm so grateful, right? I'm so thankful for what he's done, and it just really naturally flows from me. The other it rarely, right, would somebody take offense to that kind of very natural flow of conversation.
Yeah. Keisha, it makes me think, you and I were talking just about discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about that a little bit with our audience right now. Just, you're in that environment. You work in a very faith-positive, faith-friendly environment at Simmons. But you still need discernment to not make it weird.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's that look like?
You know what? I was just even thinking about what Julie was just saying about building those relationships where you have trust. So I think a part of the discernment of, like you were saying, you get up and you pray and you let God lead you in those conversations. There could be somebody that I'm just drawn to. I'm going to build a relationship with this person and be authentic about it. Not, I mean, go into it with curiosity and a mind of discovering who this person is, and not, I'm going to come in to, like you say, change anybody's beliefs or thoughts, but just be open to how God is leading you in that connection. And then once you build the relationship, you get more comfortable in being able to express, this is what God has done for me, to share, my testimony in whatever way that looks like, as opposed to, sometimes if you don't have a relationship with someone. I've had conversations, like I've had hard conversations with people at work, but that's because we've established the groundwork and we have the relationship and we know each other's heart.
Yeah.
And so we're more open and receptive to whatever the conversation may be, as opposed to just anybody that I don't really know you that well. We walk by, we say hi in the hallway, and then I just try to throw something at you. I have no clue how you might receive it.
Yeah.
I think just navigating that, like the depth of the relationships and what position that person is in.
I hear for our listeners, I just hear you both giving tremendous wisdom about like how to really be a disciple at work, a disciple of Christ at work, is know your story, right? Be willing to share your story, but in a natural way where it just kind of just flows out of just a natural conversation. Build trust, build relationship, love well, have integrity with your work. Things we talk about in the 7 pillars of faith and work. We talk about that a lot at Workmatters. I think also, I've worked with people where, Christians where like, we've got our Bible, they've had their Bible on that desk, and then they work for a company that's like, hey, you need to put your Bible in the drawer. And then they get mad. The Christian gets mad about it and demands that they be able to keep their Bible out on the table and this and that. And I just kind of go, what are you demanding? Why do you, in your years and all of that, how do you, I'm sure you've seen stuff like that where Christians are just demanding their right. How does that go over?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the problems, right? Is that there's a perception of Christians in a lot of workplaces that is a negative perception because they've had an experience with someone like that, or social media, right? They're watching kind of what's happening in debates on social media. And so I do feel like we have a great opportunity in the marketplace to show people a different perspective, right, on what a Christian really looks like and should look like and what a disciple of Jesus really is, because we are able to show them, no, as you said, I want to know who you are. I want to learn your story. I want to build a relationship with you. I want it to be built on trust. And I care about you when things are going on right in your life. And I just want to be there for you. I want to support you. We've had the opportunity in the Christian ERG, in that realm inside of Zurich, to build so many bridges, right, with folks who aren't Christian, who are folks of other faiths, but just to show them we care about them, just to show up well, love well, show them we care about them.
I think also in that same vein of discernment, one, in a situation like that, I think that we need to know the policies and procedures.
Yes.
I think
that's a great point. As a Christian, you should know what your company's policies and procedures are and be a great employee to respect those and know what the limits and the boundaries are.
It can't just be all a passion play.
That's right.
Because this is what I care about. This is what it should be. Doesn't marry with the policies. And also, just with the discernment, if it's a situation like that, like, no, I want to put the Bible on my desk for it to be seen. Bigger picture, let's step back. Is this the hill I want to die on? Is this what's most important? Why do I want my Bible here what do I want people to see? Can that not be displayed in the way that I love people? I think you just need to step back and see a bigger picture sometimes.
Well, in one way I've seen it is, there are folks, right, who are trying to get Christian employee resource groups, right, approved inside of their organizations, and they may have been denied. To your point, right, there may be policies in place where that company is not going to approve, certain kinds of employee resource groups, right, or they're going to keep those groups very limited or what have you. So, to your point, I've seen some people get really, really upset, right, and they are considering really opposing, these decisions of the company, really filing complaints, what have you. And what I always say to them is, there had been a group of Christians praying for years and years at Zurich for a Christian employee resource group to get approved long before I arrived, there.
Mm.
And so I always tell people, just get with a couple other Christians, at your organization. Start praying, be faithful, be consistent, pray for God to open a door for something to happen, in your workplace. Even
Yeah.
if you do have policies, even if your company has policies in place that make it a little more difficult, right, for you to have a prayer group, or have some kind of a fellowship in your company. But just get with some other people and start praying and see what God wants to do, right, in your organization,
Yeah.
right, where He's going to lead you. It may not be a formal employee resource group, right? He may lead you down a different path.
Yeah.
But I always say to folks, there were people praying for years and years, and then God sent me to that company in an employment law role, and allowed me, right, to be able to then give the legal advice that this, we can do this within our policies, right? And for me to
Wow.
be able to guide that. And that was only because of the prayers, right, of people who came way before me into this situation.
Wow. When, when, as I'm listening to you talk there, Julia, I mean, I just think of Jesus' words when he said, blessed are you when you're persecuted for my name's sake. When the hammer's brought down on you, I mean, you're blessed for that. He didn't and add at the end, and by the way, when that happens, take every legal route possible to get your way for my name. I just didn't hear him say that. I mean, there was a part of him where where he was just encouraging us as disciples of Christ in the places where we worked and in the marketplace to expect the persecution and the hardship and take it as a blessing. I mean, I just think that's a crazy way to look at it instead of just demanding my right to be a Christian at my workplace. It's totally different. And so talk to us just about like, when Christians are doing it well and being good disciples of Christ in a workplace, how does that affect a company positively? How do people who aren't Christians or in the leadership positions, HR positions, legal positions, how do they respond to that?
Well, I had a great example of that working at Coca-Cola Consolidated, because Coca-Cola Consolidated has 17,000 employees. So lots of employees, right, who aren't Christian, even though it is a faith-driven company. But the programs that Coca-Cola Consolidated has, for example, the response team, when one of our employees is hit by a fire or tornado or flood or hurricane, the response team goes and helps that employee, right, clean up, rebuild, and that's across the organization. They are out every week, right, helping employees who are suffering with a tragedy, a disaster, natural disaster, right, in their environment. And so Coca-Cola Consolidated is just showing how to love really well, right? That this is
Mm.
what it means to us to be Christian, is that we go out and serve. We go serve you. We help you in your time of need, right? We show up for you. And, when I was there, we would talk about, what is it that we want every employee to know about Coke Consolidated? We want them to know that the company has their back. That if they go through a hardship, if they go through a tough time during the pandemic, the company, right, was helping so many spouses of employees, right, where spouses had been, were out of work, right, during the pandemic. So Coke Consolidated wants employees to know that it has their back. It's there for them when if and when they go through a hard time. And I feel like those are the things that help show folks who aren't believers, right, who aren't Christians, this is what it really means to be a follower of Jesus in an organization.
So it's lived out.
Mm.
There's action
Yeah.
behind it. People can actually see it when it's done well and participate in it. When the other side of the coin is when it's done wrong, there's, I want to keep you at a distance.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of anything that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. In the Workmatters Institute, Keisha Fowler actually talks about love in which is one of our pillars. And I remember I was watching the video on love with a an executive team in a publicly traded company. And one of the comments I got at the end from one of the executive leaders was like, love. We don't talk about love at work. And I thought, what a great comment to them for me to turn around. If you're a Christian, you don't talk about love, just be love. And that's what you're just describing there is like just loving people well in the midst of what they're going through and the tragedy that they're experiencing, celebrating them in the midst of it. That's how we are a disciple of Christ at work. We love and we love well, right?
Well, and what I've noticed in both Zurich, right, which was a Fortune 500 secular environment, and then at Coca-Cola Consolidated, which was a faith-driven environment. In both of those, because of the love that was shown, because of the care, the relationships built, in both of those environments, there were folks who were willing to join into a small group or a Bible study or some kind of faith-based program where they were in a group with other folks. And so often these employees did not feel like they wanted to go join, a local church, did not feel that they wanted to partake, right, in a Bible study or a small group or something like that in a church environment. But because of the relationships built inside the workplace, right, because of the care shown to them by others, they felt safe and they felt comfortable exploring and asking questions, right? And trying to understand, tell me more about the Bible and tell me more about Jesus, right? And why you follow him. And I saw that in both organizations that
Wow.
just caring for people well, loving well, and living out your faith day to day attracted people, right, who wanted to then participate in these groups and learn more about Jesus. And at the end, so often at the end of those groups, the person did realize the importance of being in community, right, the importance of being with other believers, and did make that decision to go on and engage with a local church as well. So I just think the opportunity is huge. There's so many people, right, who are hungry and thirsty, right, for the hope that we have. And in the workplace, they will be attracted, right, to come and spend time with you, get to know you, ask you questions, join in a group with you when you are really living out your faith in a way that they can see.
And so on that note, I think you will make every HR and compliance officer in your company happy and the legal team of your company happy if you're loving well, because I don't think there's a policy against loving well. Would you agree with that HR and compliance expert?
I would agree. Yes. And again, so many examples. I just saw so many examples of that in especially in my time at Zurich, where there was even a time where there was consideration of should we not have faith-based employee resource groups anymore? And so there was some focus groups that were taking place with individuals who were not Christian. What do you think of this group? Do you think we should have this group or not? And the overwhelming sentiment was the folks in that group have been so kind. They have built, bridges with us.
Awesome.
We have worked together on this project, right? We've worked together on that project. And so they were able to see, right, by the way we behaved, right, the character, and they were supportive ultimately, even though they didn't agree with our faith, right? Or they weren't a member, a group of our faith group, right, necessarily, but they were able to see the benefit to the organization and just how we were living things out.
I love it. So Julia, wrap up with this. So I'm listening to this podcast, I'm driving home from work, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go to bed and show up on the job site tomorrow morning, or I'm going to show up into the office tomorrow morning, or I'm going to show up at the hospital tomorrow morning. What is one thing I can begin to do in my job tomorrow morning to be more of a disciple of Christ at work? Just give me one, maybe two things.
Definitely, I would start every morning by praying and asking God to give us the eyes to see, right, and the ears to hear where He is leading us in that day. And specifically, my prayer every day is, Lord, will you show me who you want me to connect with? right? Will you show me if there is a person that you are wanting me to encourage, you're wanting me to pray for them, or you're just wanting me to listen. Maybe I'm not even going to have a God conversation with them yet, but who is the person? And I just pray, Lord, help me be sensitive, to the Holy Spirit's leading in that. I don't want to miss somebody that you want me, right, to connect with during this day that I can be a blessing to, and that I can, again, be like Jesus. I can be an ambassador of Jesus, right, in this interaction with this person.
I love that. I love that. Pray. God, who can I connect with? Start with prayer. I love also in the Work Matters Institute. I mean, every HR and compliance officer will love an employee that does their work with excellence, with love, with service, with the heart of service, and with integrity. You will have incredible influence. We talk about that as well. So there's a plug there. Hey, Julia, people are going to want to get in touch with you. They're going to want to have help understanding policies and procedures and this conversation today. Where can they find you?
Yes, now I am providing HR leadership on a fractional basis to different organizations through Strategic People Partners. So you can find us at strategicpplpartners.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Julia, thank you so much for being on the Work Matters podcast. This was such a gift.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Work Matters podcast. I want to invite you to take the next step today in living out your faith through your work by taking our online course, the Work Matters Institute. This transformational 10-session faith and work course helps Christians connect Sunday faith to Monday work through practical teaching, spiritual formation, leadership development, and discipleship for the workplace. Taking this course will equip you to live and lead with greater clarity, purpose, integrity, and influence. To learn more or start the course today, visit workmatters.org, because God is at work in every kind of work.